how to stop those negative thoughts about your spouse. You know, you marry, everything's great, wonderful, all of that. Reality starts happening, and there's that, 2 or 3% of your spouse that might be aggravating, or you might just be having a really bad day. It could be hormone related, whether you're a male or a female. It could be circumstances. It could be other relationships are disturbing your kind of groundedness. And all of a sudden you find yourself thinking the most negative things about your spouse. And it usually goes something like, well, they don't do this, they don't do this, they don't do that. Or they do this, they do this, they do this. And you kind of get your brain in this kind of rut of looking for the negative. It starts off kind of very intermittently. But once your brain goes, oh, this is what you want to do with me, you want to collect data on how negative, how it doesn't work for you, how unhappy you are, how another person at the office or in general might be a better fit for you, and why did you do this? And all of a sudden you start getting in the habit of having negative thoughts. Well, I want to give you a couple things that you can do, because no matter who you marry, you're going to have a day like that. So because your spouse is not the problem. Your thoughts are your problem. How you think is your problem. Why you think that way is your problem, not them. They're just exposing maybe what you do with inconvenience, or your selfishness being challenged, or your ungratefulness. Because generally speaking, I've worked with over 5,000 couples. The larger percent of your spouse is really wonderful. And when you focus on that, it changes your attitude tremendously. So that's the first thing you want to do. I want you to literally put in your phone 5 things you absolutely love about your spouse. They're trustworthy. They're hardworking. They're kind to others. They're sexy. They're playful. They're dependable. They are not reckless with money or time or the children. They're incredible dads or moms, et cetera, et cetera. Have at least 5, and I want you to actually memorize them. Put them in your notes, wonderful things about my spouse, in case you can't memorize them, and keep adding to the list. That's a great thing. But when these negative thoughts come to your brain, pull it out and say, no, wait a minute. Even though what I'm thinking about might have some validity, let's put it in context. Because a negative thought is kind of like a photograph inside of a movie. Yeah, that might be true. Maybe they were short with you. But let's take the 5-10-year picture of it, and does it really matter? It doesn't. Most things that you feel that are inconvenient, you're not going to remember. So why focus there? Why train your brain for negative activity, especially towards the person you said you would love, honor, and cherish? If you're going to love, honor, and cherish them, you have to do it in your head, so that your heart doesn't start going negative. Because if it does, you're going to get hopeless and frustrated and start lusting and looking for others and, being ungrateful for what you were given, what you do have. And trust me, I've worked with over 5,000 couples. Many of them have cheated on their spouse. And what they found out is that the other person wasn't as helpful as they thought. So the first thing is make a list. A second thing you can do is just pray for them. God, I don't know what's going on with them. Please help them out. They're not themselves today. And I don't want to get into them being less than your daughter or son. It's a great thing to do. Great thing to pray for your spouse every day anyway. All right. The other thing you can do is practice praise. Because we're talking about neurological conditioning. And you are neurologically conditioning towards your spouse one way or the other. You are looking for the negative, what they don't do, how they don't show up, how they might misinform you, or other traits, right? And you start collecting data to support your premise. It's kind of like a research project. You have a premise, and then you do your research, hopefully, to prove your premise. Well, whichever premise you pick is going to be right. Because there are things that are flawed about your spouse, and there are things that are wonderful about your spouse. They're both true, and they're both factual. But which are you neurologically reinforcing? Because if you are reinforcing the positive, which is the third thing you do, is reinforce the positive. I want you every day, and this is in my book, Intimacy, a 100-Day Guide to Lasting Relationships. Strongly encourage you to get that book. It deals with sex, money, dating, emotionally based relationships, a lot of stuff. But in there is an exercise. It's called the 3 dailies, and one of those 3 dailies is 2 praises a day. You literally sit down, facing each other, and say, I really love, like, appreciate, ... about you. And then the other person says, thank you, so they let it in. And then they give you one. And then you give them a second one, and they give you a second one. Just this one discipline will train your brain, even within a month, to start seeing and collecting data that supports that they're wonderful. Will they always be flawed? Yes. Will there be bad days? Yes. But your brain is going to see those as anomalies because you're collecting the data on the positive and you're speaking it right to them. And so they feel better because they know that you actually see the positive, because someone might have worked all day, kids throwing up, diapers not working, cars getting banged up, situations happen, dogs run off, and you come home and they're not happy. Of course they're not happy. Okay, you weren't there. And so we want to be very careful about how we collect data about our spouse. Here's the thing. You are the driver in that. So if you're in your car and you're thinking how awful your life is because of your spouse, if you're going through the Rolodex of all the negative things, this is for you. Okay, if you're really good at seeing the positive and praising, I just want to encourage you to keep doing it, because in 10, 20, 30, 40 years, you're going to have a wonderful spouse. But if you go collecting the negative, you're not going to be happy no matter how wonderful they are, because it's not the person that's the problem. It's the data collection that's the problem. And it's kind of like an algorithm. You know, now that we have all these fancy apps and online things, if you go on any social media, it determines your algorithm. If you're left-leaning, you get all the left-leaning news. If you're right-leaning, you get all the right-leaning news. If you're into sexual stuff, you get all the sexual stuff. If you're into mechanics, you get all the mechanic stuff. And so it's learning you. In the same way, your brain is creating the algorithm based on the data that you're collecting and giving to it. So here's my encouragement. Get the Intimacy 100-Day Guidebook. That'll help you tremendously. If you need marriage help, give us a call, 719-278-3708. But I want you to know, you decide the spouse that you have in your brain. If you haven't subscribed, you want to do that. If you got a question, put it in the box.